The FBI remained silent about the fate of Pooja Khan. They allowed the media to carry on with the news that Mrs. Khan was killed inside the car alongside her husband and daughter. It was only after the two suspects had been arrested and interrogated that they disclosed additional information on the Khan case. According to the latest FBI statement, at the time of the car bomb detonations, Mrs. Khan was not in the car but her husband and daughter were, and were killed instantly. Mrs. Khan was found lying unconscious on the doorstep to the entrance of the house. The FBI speculated Mrs. Khan might have returned to her house to fetch something she had forgotten. In a press conference, the FBI stated that the police would not be able to give an accurate explanation for Mrs. Khan not being inside the car when the attack took place until the victim could be questioned. A hospital source indicated that Mrs. Khan was still in a coma from the shock of the explosion but currently in stable condition. The police ended the conference by saying that Mrs. Khan had miraculously escaped the assassination attempt masterminded by Muslim terrorists, but unfortunately, she lost her husband and daughter in the attack. After 3 days, Mrs. Khan came out of her coma. She could not utter a word. The only parts of her body that moved were her eyes. They stared blankly at the ceiling, reacting only to light. She did not respond to any of the medical staff or the police. The hospital prognosis called for her to be moved out of the ICU but kept her in a private room. Needless to say, there was around-the-clock FBI presence and all personnel were screened and checked, courtesy of local police officials. The FBI knew that she was still a prime target for Islamic terrorists. The Somalis had failed to assassinate her, but they would keep on trying. It was only after a week that the FBI was able to speak to Pooja Khan. Coming out of her silence and to terms with her situation, she cried hysterically for her loss. Slowly, with a great deal of patience, they came to realize that moments before the bomb was detonated, Mrs. Khan remembered that she had forgotten her Miss World crown in her dressing room and hurried to get it. As she exited the car, she told her husband to move the car out of the garage and that she would join them out in the street. Moments after locking up the house again, with her crown perched on her head, she remembered something flashing and a loud noise but remembered nothing else. She had never expected anything like this to happen to her husband and daughter. She said that her husband was born and brought up as a Muslim and had never spoken one single word against his religion or his prophet Muhammad. She could not understand why the Muslims decided to kill her along with her husband and innocent daughter. She asked the police while weeping, "What did my husband and little daughter do to the Muslims for them to want to kill them? They didn't deserve to die." The FBI had long since understood the mentality of Muslim terrorists, but could find no words to answer her question, nor offer her any comfort. They could only try to protect her from further attacks. Pooja was sent into protective custody as soon as it was possible. The imminent threat against her had not diminished and the hospital was not a secure location. They expected the terrorists would try to launch another attack. It was more a question of when than if. After her discharge, Pooja Khan was taken under high security to a safe house. She raised no objections to any of the changes made to safeguard her life by authorities. She had, for all counts, lost all interest in resuming her life and going back to her home. She felt as if her life had become meaningless. The pain in her chest surpassed the trauma of being rendered unconscious by a bomb blast and all the suffering and agony she had experienced during her many years of kidnap, rape, and imprisonment in the homes of evil men. The FBI discreetly moved Pooja Khan to a remote town and under the care of a host family. The family was a Jewish couple who had 4 children, 2 sons and 2 daughters. They were all grown up with children of their own. The father was a retired FBI officer who operated the safe house. His wife was a retired schoolteacher and the couple had been living alone for many years after their children had left home. This was not the first instance where they had offered to house those needing a safe refuge. This was the first time they had shared their roof with a Muslim. The Jewish couple recognized Pooja Khan as a Muslim from her last name. To their credit, they did not refuse her or try to dissuade her from staying with them when she arrived. Pooja was still younger than their youngest grandchild, and some of their parenting instincts immediately came into play. Before long, the old couple realized that Pooja Khan was very childish and her coping skills were not as developed as they should be. She was constantly weeping even though the old couple tried their best to comfort her. When they realized that their efforts at consoling her were not working, they left her in solitude so that she could work out her own emotions in her own time. It took Pooja a very long time to accept the fact that she had lost her loving husband and beloved daughter. She spent 1 month locked up in her room. She would not eat with them and preferred to have food brought to her in her room. The couple was very patient with her, tolerating what could be read as aloofness and irrational behavior. They did not repay her behavior with harsh or scolding words. The Jewish couple were under instruction to keep Pooja Khan under constant surveillance. She was not to venture out alone nor be left alone at any time. She was considered a small suicide risk, besides being a prime target for Islamists. So it was that whenever the old couple went out, they would take Pooja with them. Within her first week, the couple took her to a small market in town, and on the following Saturday, they took her to their synagogue. The couple knew that Pooja Khan was a Muslim girl, but they had no choice except to bring her along. At first, the couple thought that Pooja might react negatively to being forced to sit in a Jewish place of worship, but their first experience proved them wrong. She was not as strict a Muslim that they had been led to believe. They had not noticed her fulfilling her daily prayers or reciting verses from the Quran. At the synagogue, they introduced her to the elders of their congregation. Through it all, they maintained their cover story that Pooja Khan was a paying guest who came to live with them for a while. After staying with them for a couple of weeks, the Jewish couple started to decorate their house and prepare for Passover. Pooja's knowledge about God was scant, and her breadth of general religious knowledge was even worse. She had acquired very little formal or aesthetic education of even the two religions she had grown up with. None of the people who exerted influence over her had bothered to provide her with religious instruction or share what it meant to worship God. All of them were using her for their own pleasure and advantage to different degrees. Some had nurtured her, some had neglected her, but most of them had downright abused her and stunted her growth. Pooja Khan had memories of growing up in a destitute Muslim family. Her memory was vivid when yet a child. She was married to an old man from Saudi Arabia. As an adult, she was adopted by a Hindu woman, but remained a Muslim. Then, she fell in love and married a Muslim man and had a child with him. Somewhere in between, her Hindu mother forced her to marry a Hindu boy. Her Hindu husband converted her to Hinduism and changed her name from Aphrodite Khan to Pooja Patel. When she returned to the United States, she deserted her Hindu husband and returned to her Muslim lover. Although she married her Muslim lover, she carried a Hindu name. Her marriage to her Muslim husband forced her to switch back to her old family name of Khan. Pooja Khan knew that destiny had placed her in the hands of Muslims and Hindus. It was her stay with a Jewish family that exposed her to the teachings of the Old Testament. She had never been to a mosque or temple, nor read the Quran or the Bhagavad Gita. Her first visit to a place of worship was a Jewish synagogue. At first, it was all Greek to her. As she continued to attend the synagogue with her caretakers every Saturday, she began to grasp the meaning of religion and the concept of God. When the old couple began to prepare for their Passover, she started to show some interest in their religious rituals. She started to come out of her seclusion and mingle with the old couple. She began to ask questions about their religious symbols and practices. The old couple were happy when they saw that a Muslim girl was interested in understanding their religion. After staying for a month, one day Pooja Khan saw a handsome young man sitting in the living room of her caretakers. The young man was called Michael. Michael was the youngest grandson of Benjamin and Miriam Lewinsky. He was the son to one of their 2 daughters. His mother Deborah was also the youngest among the couple's 4 children. Michael was born out of the wedlock. Deborah, at the age of 20, fell in love with her classmate while away at college, and in a whirlwind relationship lasting a few months, Michael was conceived. Her German boyfriend had asked her to abort the unborn child, but Deborah held to her convictions and refused. Bound and strengthened by her religious upbringing, she kept her baby, but never saw her boyfriend again. Michael grew up not knowing his biological father. Deborah moved on, completed college, and found employment. In time, she fell in love with one of her colleagues and they were married. Although they had 4 children, Deborah never told her husband or her children about her firstborn. Michael was barely a few days old when Deborah abandoned him to her parents and walked away as if he was dinner leftovers. Deborah went to the extent of requesting her parents not ever tell her son that she was his biological mother. Her parents reluctantly accepted her condition. They followed her wish and hid the truth from their grandson about his biological mother. When Michael grew up, his grandparents told him that someone had left him in a basket at their doorstep when he was only a few days old. With no reason to doubt his grandparents, Michael grew up believing that he was an abandoned child. Nevertheless, he relished in the love and care of his grandparents that they naturally assumed the role of parents to him. His grandparents gave him their last name and he was to them a late-born son. None of their other children or many grandchildren knew about the Michael secret. All of them lived the lie that his mother had forced upon the family. Benjamin and Miriam Lewinsky loved their youngest daughter more than they loved any of their other 3 children. She was their last-born and she spent more time with them than any of the couple's other children. She was the only one among their 4 children who never missed a single religious festival and always visited her parents and spent time with them with her husband and children in tow. During her visits, she never let on to Michael that she was not his sister. As was expected, Michael treated his biological mother like his aunt, her husband as his uncle, and her children as his cousins. Likewise, whenever his other uncles and aunts and their spouses and children came for the holidays, Michael treated them as his relatives. Michael Lewinsky lived with his grandparents until he graduated high school. He gained admission into Harvard University and moved into the city but kept in touch with his grandparents. Long weekends or holidays would inevitably find him spending time at home. During his studies, Michael had 3 romances with his female counterparts but all of them ended prematurely. It was always his religious convictions that caused his girlfriends to leave him. Michael did not believe in sexual relations before marriage. His Jewish parents instilled in him their own values, among them, that sex before marriage was wrong and abortion was murder. Among all the Lewinsky clan, it was only in Michael that their values took hold. He was the only one who upheld the family traditions while the rest of the clan rebelled. All the other Lewinsky children had affairs and slept with their partners prior to marriage the moment they left home. The only hitch was that Michael was exposed to Christian evangelists in school and along the way gravitated to Christianity. His conversion upset his grandparents, but they didn't love him any less. Michael met Pooja at the end of the first month of her stay. He had learnt only a little about her from his grandparents. He was told that she was a Muslim and for some reason, she had run into trouble with fundamentalist Somali terrorists who had killed her husband and her child. He was aware that the FBI had insisted on her being in protective custody with his parents and were paying for her maintenance and upkeep. His grandparents looked pleased when they mentioned that they had begun to teach her about the Jewish faith and that she was becoming a regular with them at their synagogue. What other little interaction there was led Michael to see her as someone who was a loner and therefore unapproachable. Understandably, during his visits home, he kept his distance and was careful not to intrude into her personal space. After a couple of months, Michael began noticing a change in Pooja's interaction with him. She had started to join them during mealtimes and would sometimes take part in their prayers and readings.